Today I want to talk about a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I'm going to call this series Understanding Your Pain. And when I talk about pain, what I'm talking about is, for me personally, I've had 9 shoulder dislocations of my right shoulder over about a 6-year period. And if you haven't had a shoulder dislocated, don't do it. But it is extremely painful. And the pain of it was very debilitating for 3 to 6 weeks where you could hardly do anything. But for me I think I was probably 23 the first time I dislocated my shoulder, the emotional part of it, of not understanding why this was happening and not having anything I could do about it that I could control, because I was in the weight room 5 days a week back then. I had over a 250-pound bench press. I was active in basketball, and this is where things were, starting to happen on the basketball court, where I was dislocating my shoulder. So the emotional and psychological component was just as big as the physical component was for me for a good part of a decade. And so what I want to share with everybody today is some of the things that I learned that when I was dislocating, and it was the 5th time and the 6th time, and I'm like, what am I not getting? What, am I just that obtuse that I'm just not? There's something obviously going on that isn't fixing itself. I don't understand it, and I'm continuing to have it. And then I started learning how the body works. I started learning the systems of how does shoulder stability come about, and what are some of the things that affect it. And as I started learning the things that actually affect the shoulder, I was like, I am not, the mystery was solved. Let's just put it this way. Everything that I learned, like, this is how this should be, this is the posture it should be, and here's how you should breathe, here's all the factors. I'm like, oh, well, now that I know the rules of shoulder stability, now I am not confused. I was like, how did it ever stay in once I started learning the rules? So, but I didn't come about that by conventional means. I didn't read a book. I didn't go to a doctor. I started learning the anatomy. I started learning posture. I started learning about muscles and stability and how they work. And what I want to do is start getting some of the philosophy. Now, the factors to anything on the subject we're going to talk about are going to be along these lines. On the bottom, we have the physical structures. So the bones, the muscles, the joints, what they want to be happy. On the side here, we have chemistry. What we're taking in, what we're replacing cells with, the quality of raw materials we're using to build structure. And then over here, we have the mental, emotional, psychological, and spiritual part of our nature. Now, for every person, all of these things are always going to be a factor. And in one of these areas is going to be what I call the lowest hanging fruit. The areas that are the easiest to improve, the hardest on our ego, but the best chance to make a positive impact is going to be whichever one of these we're doing, the worst in at the moment, if we're willing to make that adjustment. So one of the parts that I would call the mindset was, number one, we have confusion because when we have something happen to us, like my shoulder dislocated, it seemed to me like it came out of nowhere, which it really didn't. There was like the day before I dislocated my shoulder, and then there was the day that it happened for the first time. And there wasn't a lot of things that I noticed happening before full dislocation. So the things that were causing the issue to start deteriorating, one of the things that I learned was if we have pain, we could go from 100% functionality all the way down past 90, past 80, like we might be at 70% or less in functionality before we have a sensation that we would call pain and think that there's an issue. So if we started on a process of going from ideal to painful in function or dysfunctional or injury or, catastrophic in my case, it's hard to say what started this. Because it's just not this happened. Like if we get in a car accident, we know, major injury happened on this date. I fell off of something. We understand that. But if it's something that deteriorates slowly over time, by the time we're aware there's an issue, we might have lost a lot of function. And we don't relate the loss of function to the pain because it might be over a 6-month or a 9-month or a 3-year period. So understanding that in the marketplace, I've found a lot of things that are looking at trying to relieve pain, and they may or may not work. I've seen a lot of things that I was like, who came up with this idea? Injecting weird things into the body to try to dull nerves. Like, we don't want... The absence of pain isn't the objective all the time. The objective to getting better is increasing function. If you find out how things work and you can increase the function with wherever you are, like my shoulder was probably at 60% functionality when I started this process. If you look to go this direction, eventually you're going to get to a point where the functionality is high enough where you are pain-free. You can chase pain around and continue to lose functionality and never get anywhere with the issue. I've seen lots of people that are stuck because they're chasing getting rid of pain versus getting into function. When everything works the way it's supposed to, pain is there to tell us that there's been an issue, and it might have been an issue for a long period of time. We don't always know, where it came from, so it's very easy to be confused. Like, there's a lot of people that have pain that they don't know why. And looking for the answers of why is this is just as much a psychological pain as the physical pain of the injury. It's like being scared to go play basketball and wonder is this going to be one of those times where I dislocate again? Was robbing basketball of a lot of its pleasure. I like to play basketball. I have to play a certain way, and if I'm hesitant or fearful, now I'm not really enjoying basketball the way I should. And when you don't know what to do or not to do to cause the issue, it seemed to me like I couldn't tell you whether my shoulder was stable or not stable. Because I could do push-ups. I could do overhead presses. I could do bench presses and all kinds of things that said my shoulder is stable. And then I would be up in a certain position and looking up and twisting. And then it seemed like there was nothing holding my shoulder in its place. And I didn't know how to predict that. So I didn't know if today was going to be a good day or a horrible day. Some of the things I learned over time, then it started making sense. I started finding where I had scar tissue in my neck. When that scar tissue would push on a certain nerve, that nerve would shut off a bundle of nerves in my neck that would go to my arm. And then when you don't have nerve function to the arm, nothing is telling the muscles that are stabilizing it to turn on, and you have no stability. Solve, nerve issue in neck. That was from old car accidents that I wouldn't have associated with my shoulder dislocation, but I had 5 car accidents in my youth to probably 25 that I would have called all of them minor. I wouldn't have called any of them major. I didn't walk away going, gosh, I just got devastated. I'm going to have major issues. But I had set up things in motion, and I was losing function until it showed up one day with shoulder dislocation. Now, some of the things that I learned about what it needed for me to not dislocate my shoulder, some of the rules. One was posture. So I was looking for answers for years. I had seen lots of practitioners, started asking, telling people that I had an issue and looking for some information I didn't have on it. The third time I dislocated my shoulder, it went back in, but it didn't feel centered, didn't feel right. So I went to a chiropractor and got it adjusted back in, found out there's practitioners, there's chiropractors, there's body workers that work on tissue. And I would get my tissue worked on. But one of the things that I found is that all the injuries that you have, no matter where they are, there's one place that they sit until they're resolved, and that's in your brain. So I learned that when we go to move, we have something that I call roll call that happens. So when you go to do a task, you're going to go walk up the stairs. You don't think about what muscles you use. You don't think about joint positions and any of these things. These are all things that are built into our reflexes. But your brain does, and it says, of all the tissues that are involved, which muscles can work, how far can they move, and how much weight can they hold. And this is happening at the speed of light, 187,000 miles per second. Okay, you're not thinking about it. We are not aware of what we're doing until we get to watch what we do. It's like, hey, I want to take this pen and I want to write on the board. I don't choose what parts of my fingers and all that stuff that's involved in doing it. I just do it. But we can observe what happens in roll call, putting somebody on the table and having them do a movement with a little bit of resistance, or I'll put somebody on a table and I'll hold their feet and I'll have them push their legs apart. So they're doing this movement. I'll have them pull their legs together. I'll have them push their legs down. I'll have them lift their legs up. I'll have them do what legs are supposed to do. And then we're going to find out who's showing up. So some of the muscles will be happy to show up and other parts of the muscle won't. And we're going to get a functionality score. And this is going to affect posture because we have muscles on both sides of the joint all the time that have to work in unison. And inside a joint structure, if this is the shoulder joint, it wants to be centered. It should have room on the front. It should have room on the back. I started learning about what posture looked like. I learned that there was muscles that are what we call bullies, or things that are overused. So just about everything in my shoulder was internally rotated, where my standard posture, when I would stand still and be relaxed, looked like this. I had both, you talk about walking like an ape. I had all knuckles showing in front of me. And my arms rested in front of my body when I stood still. Now it looks weird now when I do it, but this, your hand should be like a knife edge on your side while you're walking. They shouldn't be rotated this way. They shouldn't be rotated this way. They should be like this. So once I started figuring stuff out, like, gosh, all this internal rotation is pulling things to one side, it's a lot easier to pinch nerves when you don't have room for the nerves. So as you start learning the rules, I call it honoring systems. So I didn't have poor posture in my shoulder joint because I wanted it. I had no idea what the posture of the shoulder would be. If I say the word posture, everybody does a universal thing. They do like this. They try to sit up straight. They push the chest out. They bring the shoulders back because they're trying to please grandma or whoever. It's like, you got to get your posture right. Well, we don't understand. As a society, we don't teach. I'll put it this way. There's probably some people that understand it. But in our society, we don't teach posture. We don't teach muscle balance. We don't know how to honor our structure. We don't know how to go into the brain and bring it back into this conversation to do what I would call an update. Because we have some things that say, for this particular thing, I'm out. I can't. We'll have a muscle that says, I can't. I just twisted my ankle the other day. I tore some things, so I tore some structure. I tore some ligaments and some tendons. Okay? So when your body goes to talk to your brain to do roll call, it's not asking your muscle tissue. It's asking your tendons and your ligaments. So when you close your eyes and you go to touch your nose, you can, because your body figures out where you are in space based on the amount of tension on ligaments and tendons. So the brain talks to the tendons give information back to the brain to say, this is how far we can move and this is how much weight we can hold. So the tendons and the ligaments is part of the structure. So a tendon is a muscle connection to a bone, and a ligament is a bone's connection to a bone. So what we want in order for this to say yes is it needs to feel stable, which is its connection to the ground. So stability is our connection to the ground, where the more stable we are, the more force we can put through something. And if we're not stable, the body says, don't load it. Well, guess what? If we're in gravity, we're under load. So if we're going to stop loading certain things, we're automatically going to deviate our posture. Okay, if I sprain my left ankle, I'm going to pitch more of my weight to my right leg. Why? Because I don't want to put stuff through here, and the body's going to give you something to let you know you don't want to do it. It's called pain. It's very useful. The body says, we can't handle that much weight right now. So you go to step and you're like, okay, well, we're not loading that. So we're going to shift that weight over to the right side. We might turn the joint inside or outside so that we can avoid what I call the electric fence of that pain. And this all happens subconsciously. And we figure it out because we're still moving, we're still living life while we had an injury or a setback or something that got shut off. Now, we could have something that just barely got tweaked, or we could have something that's devastating and we know. It's like life-altering, okay? I stepped in a hole, I fell off this, whatever it is, and now we know that we can't load it. So we set up this whole network of what I call limp mode. So we set up limp mode. And where is it? It's a software program in the brain. And I'm going to put this in quotes too. It's a temporary software program. Why are we limping? Because we hurt our ankle. Okay, so for how long can't we load it? Well, there's no magic thing that says as soon as that thing, so why can't we load it? We lost stability. Our body has to make some new cells to take the place of the ones that got destroyed or tore. So we're going to make some new cells, and these new cells need time. So if we've got a tendon ligament injury, we need at least 6 weeks to start getting some new cells, and I call it like pouring wet cement. It needs to dry and it needs to mature. The connective tissue in our body, as it grows, it starts weaving itself together. So something will be unstable, but as it, as the cement starts to dry and harden and mature and stabilize, it tightens up. It's like my shoulder back when I was, so luckily for me, it'll be 19 years in May since I've dislocated my shoulder. But back when it first happened, my shoulder was probably sitting way down here because it was just, everything was tore up and lax. So as it's matured and, inputs and it tightens up, you get your posture back. So while this is maturing, your body sets up limp mode or detours. If you use like traffic, your body detours, wait around the issue. And this happens in, if we're young and we're playing sports, our body figures out a way to get by on limp mode. But what I've discovered is this stuff might be capable, it might have matured, and it might be capable of holding a load well before it's ever utilized. Because when we're on detour, we're in get by mode or in limp mode, we're still getting by. And we're not stopping to update the brain to say, hey, can we go load this stuff? So it takes a unique environment and inputs through the muscular system that I call neuromuscular. We're just having the brain update how it's engaging things. And this is what I call low-hanging fruit. What is low-hanging fruit? It's easy to get to. So everybody's body has some things that went into limp mode that they might know, they might remember. I broke my arm when I was 7. Some things got shut off. They may never have gotten turned back on until I did it on purpose. I got hit by a car when I was 9. Contusion to the bone. Some of that stuff, I'm still waking those things up. So we'll have things that are sitting in limp mode, and now we are so far from where we started to deviate that it might be years later. People have a car accident and they think they're fine, and then a year later, 18 months later, they're starting to have headaches. Why? Because they started this process. One of the things that is very sneaky about bringing pain is when we have instability. So when the body doesn't feel stable in its structure, like your neck and your back are held together by ligaments. When those ligaments get tweaked, your body can go recruit muscle to stabilize. And when that muscle is chosen by the brain to stabilize this stuff, this becomes like a 24/7 job. Contract and hold. A muscle is very happy when it gets to breathe. Contract, take stuff in, relax. Shorten, lengthen. This leads to flow. We start getting blood flow, we can bring nutrients in, we can flush waste out. When we don't flush waste out, waste is acidic, and acid on nerve is pain. So when your muscles get recruited to stabilize, we might have a buffer. They might start out at 100%, and then they have to do this contract and hold, and now we have a bunch of waste that builds up in them. They start getting acidic. Our body starts telling us things, and all of a sudden we know that we're in pain, but we don't know why. And that's why I like using the process that I call muscle phasing as a way of going into the brain, through the body, through roll call, figure out who's working, who's not working. And then we start to unpack the story and we start to get into the layers of the things. So hopefully this is a good start to understanding why you might have pain, why you might want to come in, why you might want to get a map done and start seeing where the low-hanging fruit is and get you on your way to more functionality. Eventually, being more functional is going to lead to less pain. So hopefully this is helpful, and we'll add to this as we go, and look forward to the next video with you guys.